Today, we're continuing our Windows Fundamentals education as a part of the Windows Fundamentals module for the Cybersecurity 101 pathway of TryHackMe. And so this is the Windows and AD Fundamentals portion, and we'll be doing Windows Fundamentals Part 3 today, and then we're going to go into Active Directory Basics in the next video. And this is all, again, a part of the Cybersecurity 101 pathway of TryHackMe. Which really is all comprehensive, and so far we've had some really good rooms, some really good education, and today we're going to be continuing specifically with Windows. And what we're going to be talking about today are going to be the built-in Microsoft tools that keep the actual device secure, like the Windows updates, Windows security, BitLocker, and a few other elements of Windows. And for the most part, it seems like you're going to be talking about, or we're going to be talking about system administration, but we're looking at everything with the perspective of a cybersecurity analyst and a security engineer. So the big piece of everything that we're going to talk about will come from that context, from that mindset. And as the introduction, we're required to launch the virtual machine that has been assigned to us, which I've already done, so it should be up and running by now. And if you have access to OpenVPN with the TryHackMe server, then you can just log in via remote login, remote desktop, using these credentials. This is going to be my credential, so obviously this IP address won't apply to you. When you actually log into this room and you launch the virtual machine, you'll get your own IP address, and then from there you can use the administrator and the password to remote desktop into the machine. This room itself is actually a free room. So this is another one of the free rooms that's available inside of TryHackMe. So anybody with a basic membership to TryHackMe will be able to launch the virtual machine, connect to the virtual machine, and run through the exercises that we got. If you have an actual Windows machine yourself that you're watching this on, then you can just follow along in your own Windows machine and really learn more about your own computer if you don't already know these things. So you can use a Windows machine in multiple different ways. I'm actually on a Mac OS, so I have to do this so that I can get that Windows OS interface to be able to walk through the rest of these things with you. So that's pretty much it for the intro of it. The very first piece that we're going to be talking about is the Windows updates portion. Windows Update is a service provided by Microsoft. It essentially just shows you when anytime there is a new update that's available for Windows and what you should do. And a lot of times you can even just set up automatic updates that when there is an update available, the computer will just reboot itself. Usually it happens at night, and it'll also notify you that, hey, there's a new update available. Do you want me to just do this? And you can select to do it actively in that moment, or you could just schedule it for it to be updated for you. Typically, they're released the second Tuesday of each month, and it's called Patch Tuesday. And it doesn't mean that there's a critical update or something that's happening for Patch Tuesday to be released. So Patch Tuesday is typically when a new update is released, but if there's something that's crucial, a critical update, so to speak, if something like that exists, then you'll get the notification immediately, and you'll just have that update available for you, and then you should definitely update. The whole idea is to update as the updates come in to keep your operating system up to date, and all of the most recent patches will be available, and that way anything that they have discovered, so Windows team, the pen testers and ethical hackers on the Windows team are constantly trying to break Windows so that they stay ahead of the curve of all of the hackers that are actually maliciously trying to hack into Windows. So when they push these updates, a lot of times it's so that you can also stay ahead of the curve, so that you don't have to worry about malicious attackers actually attacking your version of Windows because it's an outdated version, right? So an update, for the most part, will bring with it just some nuanced details, or a lot of times it'll bring with it a critical update that's actually a security update. And that's something that you should always keep in mind. And just as a habit, just keep your system up to date so you don't have to worry about it. To be able to see it, you can actually access your Windows update in a variety of different ways. The main one, the most current, or the most successful, I guess, or the easiest, however we want to talk about it, the best way to access it would be on the Windows settings portion. So you can just do Windows in the run dialog box or CMD by running this particular command, and it'll run the Windows update for you, and it'll typically open up Windows settings and it'll just go to that. If you go into Windows settings manually yourself, you can click on update and security, and then you'll be able to do that. In the attached virtual machine that we actually have a few items that we can look at. So for example, the Windows settings are managed. Typically home users will not see this type of message. There are no available updates available for the machine that we have because it's a controlled environment, and most likely it doesn't have access to the internet, so it won't be able to see all of the new versions of Windows that have been launched ever since they created this lab. So for the most part, for our specific instance, there isn't going to be an update available. But if you actually check this on your Windows machine, there's probably a good chance that there's some kind of an update available. Throughout the years, Windows users have grown accustomed to pushing Windows updates off to a later date or not installing it at all. And various reasons cause this because the reboot is typically required after a Windows update, and sometimes it can be done, or sometimes when an update happens, I remember from what I went through, it would make my computer slower in some cases, and so I was always just hesitant about updating it. But as far as the computer rebooting, Microsoft has addressed this in Windows 10, and it can no longer be ignored or pushed to the side until it's forgotten. So updates can only be postponed, but eventually the update will happen and your computer will reboot, whether or not you like it. Microsoft provides these updates to keep the device safe and secure, and this is what it looks like when it says there is a restart required so that you can boot the computer, right? So there's a Windows update, restart required, so on and so forth. You can either restart it now or schedule the restart, and that's typically what I do, and I schedule it for when I'm asleep. So I'll just do it for later on that day or that night, and then when I go to sleep, the computer is just rebooting and doing what it needs to do. So there is a lot of stuff available in the FAQ section of Windows updates if you wanted to check that out. And that is, of course, a Microsoft website, so the Support Microsoft website that you can go to and just look at Windows Update FAQ. Or if you have access to this particular room, which is a free room on TryHackMe, you can just go get that link directly yourself or just Google it. There's so many different ways that you can get access to the Windows Update FAQ. Now, what we have at the bottom here is a specific question for us where it says there's 2 definition updates installed in the attached VM. On what date were these updates installed? So the date is obviously here, but I'm going to show you how we got that particular answer. So first and foremost, we're going to go to our system settings. All right, so that's basically how it was. Just in case you didn't see it, I uploaded the settings by clicking on that gear when you click on the start button. So when you click on this thing right here, that little gear will automatically just open up the settings menu for you, and then this is what it looks like. And then you scroll down, you go to update and security, and then you end up on the update and security tab. So what we're looking for is the history of our updates, so we can see the date that the installed, what is it, definition updates was installed. So let me see where we can find that. It's been a while since I've done this room, so let me see where we can actually find it. Oh, it's actually right here on the update history. So we have driver updates when we click on update history, and then we have definition updates, and then we do the bottom drop down, and both of them were done on 5/3/2021. So those are my 2 definition updates, and that's how I found them in my update history, and the answer is 5/3/2021. So there is the Windows updates portion. So now let's talk about Windows security. Microsoft says that Windows security is your home to manage the tools that protect your device and your data. It's also available in our settings. So when you go open up the settings, there's a Windows security tab that we can click on, and it has these various areas that we can focus on. So we have the virus and threat protection, firewall and network protection, app and browser control, and device security. We will go into each one of these individual portions as we go along with this room. There's a quick comment on the status icons here. So green means that everything is all good and you're sufficiently protected. There's no recommended actions. Yellow means that there's a safety recommendation, and red means that there's a warning that's something you need to address right away. So in this particular situation, there is red, meaning that virus and threat protection most likely is turned off, meaning the device is vulnerable and you need to address it. So we would click on Open Windows Security, and it would bring this particular segment up for us, and we can see that there's mostly green here with the exception of that one red X. So since the the virtual machine is a Windows Server 2019, it looks different from Windows 10 or Professional Edition. This is from the Windows 10 device right here. So this is what Windows security looks like on a Windows 10 device, which is a little bit more streamlined, a little bit more up to date, but you still see that there's the green logos. And then if there's anything else that needs to be addressed, it would be either in yellow or red. So in the above image, which area needs immediate attention, which was this portion, which is the virus and threat protection. So this one is pretty easy, and we can look at it from Windows security. So if I just went back in this machine right here, I also have Windows security that I can click on, and once I click on that, it'll bring this up. And of course it says virus and threat protection is also turned off. In our case, that would be what we need to address. So that was it for Windows security. Let us now go into virus and threat protection, which is the thing that actually was turned off, right? Virus and threat protection is divided into two parts, which is the current threats and the threat protection settings. This is what it looks like when we're looking at current threats. So there's no current threats on this particular machine, which is all good. There's the last scan that they did. There were 0 threats that were found. The scan lasted 26 seconds and 34,000 files were scanned. And that was the quick scan. And you can even specify the types of scans that you want to run by going into the scan options. We have the quick scan, we have the full scan, and the custom scan. So quick scan just checks the folders on the system where threats are commonly found. Full scan checks everything, all the files and running programs on the disk. This could take longer than 1 hour, so you just got to keep that in mind. A custom scan is where you just designate where you want the scan to actually take place. The threat history will show you the last scan, so it automatically scans the device for the viruses and other threats to keep it safe, so you get to see that information. There are quarantine threats that have been isolated and prevented from running on your device, and they will be periodically removed. And sometimes there are things that you would download that you need to remove from quarantine because your system will automatically quarantine them because it thinks that it is a threat. In a lot of cases, like an intrusion detection system or something of that resort will actually be quarantined, or something of that sort. I should say, not resort. I'm kind of running out of words today. My mind is mangled it a little bit. So something in that regard, like if it's an IDS or something that is meant to detect viruses, in a lot of cases, because it's trying to access sensitive areas of the system automatically thinks that it is a threat, and so it will quarantine it. But in that case, you would have to go and remove it from the quarantine list so that software could actually function properly. And then there are allowed threats that are items that are identified as threats which you allow to run on your device. For example, the stuff that we took out of quarantine that the system thinks is a threat, but it's actually not a threat. The allowed item that has been identified as a threat, only if you're 100% sure of what you're doing, you need to allow it if you really know what you're doing. And the only time that I actually do it is when I know for a fact, based on instructions that I got from the IDS website, so Snort, for example, or Wireshark, or any of these tools that have been notoriously known as security appliances. Sometimes the system will think that they are a threat, and therefore it will quarantine it as such, and then you would need to allow it to run. The only time that I would do that, though, is when I know that I've downloaded it directly from the source website. I haven't downloaded it from Pirate Bay or some kind of a third-party place, because you never know if it's been modified, because hackers will actually modify these software so that they can start sniffing your traffic and monitoring your devices. So the best way to do it is get it directly from the source, and then that way you can be sure that these security appliances are actually what they are, and then you can trust them to run on your computer. Then you have the virus and threat protection settings. So for example, we see that it can be turned on in this particular case because it was off. There are the threat protection and virus updates, and we have ransomware protection as well. So the real-time protection for the settings, it locates and stops malware from installing on your or running on your device in real time. Cloud-delivered protection is increased and faster protection with access to the latest protection data in the cloud. There's automatic sample submission, send sample files to Microsoft to help protect you and others from potential threats. controlled folder access, protect files and folders, memory areas on your device from unauthorized changes by unfriendly applications, exclusion, so Windows Defender antivirus won't scan items that you've excluded, and notifications. Defender will send notifications with critical information about health and security to your device based on what you have designated to be a notifiable event. And then we have the excluded items that could contain threats that make your device vulnerable. So make sure that you know what you're doing if you put something on the excluded items list inside of the exclusions right here. The virus and threat protection updates, so manually check for updates on Windows Defender antivirus definitions. And then there's ransomware protection that requires this feature to be enabled, which in turn requires real-time protection to be enabled. So ransomware is also a really big deal, because if somebody comes and encrypts your data, they will go ahead and ask you for money so they can decrypt your data so you can get access to what you're looking for. So ransomware protection should always be turned on. Real-time protection is turned off on the attached VM to decrease the chances of performance issues. Since the VM can't reach the internet and there aren't any threats in the VM, it's safe to do this. Real-time protection should definitely be enabled in your personal Windows devices unless you have a third-party product that provides the same protection. Ensure it's always up to date and enabled. You can perform on-demand scans of any file or folder by right-clicking on the item and selecting Scan with Microsoft Defender. So you can check anything that has been downloaded before running it to make sure that it's actually legit and it won't mess anything up on your computer. The below image was taken from another Windows device to show this feature. So when you right-click on something, you can scan with Microsoft Defender. So what is turned off on the Windows that is notifying you to turn on? In our particular case, is going to be real-time protection. So if I click on virus and threat detection, I can go over here and then we can see that virus and threat detection is real-time protection that has been off, leaving your device vulnerable, and we want to make sure that we turn it on. I'm going to just keep it off for the hell of it, just to see what would happen. Maybe for the rest of the lab, at some point they're going to ask us to turn it on, but we will see what goes on. Usually I get ahead of myself and I do something before the instruction gets there, and then I have to go backtrack. So I'm not going to do it yet. On to firewall and network protection. So per Microsoft, traffic flows into and out of your devices via what we call ports. There are 65,000 plus ports that are available on any internet connected device, typically computers. A firewall is what controls what is, and more importantly, is not allowed to pass through those ports. You can think of it as a security guard standing at the door, checking the ID of everything that tries to enter or exit. You should have your firewall turned on all the time as well. This is what it looks like when you go into the firewall and network protection section. So you have the domain network, firewall is on. So this is port 53 typically, and also the DHCP dynamic host configuration protocol as well. Then you have the private network, and then you have your public network, and all of those things the firewall is on. And then you can configure your firewall rules to see whether or not certain traffic should be allowed to come in or even leave your particular local network or your local computer. So these are the three categories that we have, which is the domain, private, and public. So the domain applies to networks where the host system can authenticate to a domain controller. The private is the private profile that a user is assigned and is used to designate private or home networks. And then you have the default, which is the public profile, that is used to designate public networks like the Wi-Fi hotspots at coffee shops, airports, and other locations. If you click on any of the firewall profiles, we can see that another option will appear, another screen will appear, where it says that you can turn it on or off, or you can block all incoming connections on this particular network. So in this particular case, for the private network, we can see that it's actually been turned on. And then do you want to block all incoming connections, including those in the list of allowed applications? And if you do that, it's a deny all rule that is applied to the firewall, and it will deny all of the incoming condition, or all of the incoming connections, excuse me. So you always want to turn it on, and you always want to keep it enabled unless you really know what you're doing. And even if you know what you're doing, a lot of times you never disable it permanently or for more than a few minutes or for your test period. You're only disabling it for 5 to 10 minutes, and then you enable it right afterwards, because it's one of the biggest things that should be constantly running because it'll control who can and cannot connect to your computer. And when you go to a website, there's a series of attacks that could be taking place every time that you visit a particular location, and you just want to make sure that you have your firewall enabled at all times to protect yourself against any third-party attacks or anything that is happening when you are just randomly roaming the internet and browsing the internet. So when you go through the allowed apps location to actually allow particular apps to communicate through the Windows Defender firewall, you get to check whatever apps you actually want to be allowed to run through the Windows Defender firewall. And these are, this is called the mandatory access control, or it's very similar to the mandatory access control, where you specifically allow these ones that are checked to be working, and then everything else is not allowed to run. And this is mandatory. There is no way to get around it. And it's very specific because you're dealing directly with individual applications and whether or not they're allowed to communicate through the private or the public network, vice versa. You can view what the current settings for any firewall profile are in the image above. Several apps have been listed in the private and or public firewall profile. Some of them will provide additional information if it's available via the details button. So if any of these things were checked, you could click the details button. This one particularly does not have any details that you can check. And then we have the advanced settings that looks just like this. You have the left pane, the central pane, and the right pane. And the, I guess we're not going to go deep into it. We might potentially go into another room where we can look at the Windows Defender Firewall in greater detail. But since this is technically a fundamentals room, I guess I'm not going to throw too much information at you. I'm just going to keep it at the level of the syllabus of this particular room, just to make sure that you know what exists and where things are. So advanced security, as the name implies, it is for advanced rules and for advanced people. So we're not going to throw all of this at you because this is technically a beginner level room. This is not an advanced room. So configuring the Windows Defender Firewall is for advanced Windows users. Refer to the following Microsoft documentation on the best practices, which is available at this particular link. So you can go to the Learn Microsoft website and look at the configure rules with group policy and a variety of other rules, because there's a lot of different ways that you can configure the firewall to do what you want it to do. And as you can tell, it's nice, heavy reading. This is some good nighttime reading. If you want something to help you fall asleep at night, you could probably just read through that. So if you're connected to an airport Wi-Fi, what is most likely to be the active firewall profile? And that would be the public network, because we did discover that this one right here is the default that is used to designate public networks like Wi-Fi hotspots at coffee shops, airports, and other locations. So that would be the public network that would be active when you are running to an airport or like a coffee shop or something like that, a public profile for your firewall. All right, let us move to app and browser control. Here we're going to look at the Microsoft Defender Smart Screen, and this should not be confused with an actual computer screen. This is screen in the context of screening something, right? So filtering, you can think of it that way. So Microsoft says that the Defender Smart Screen protects against phishing or malware websites and applications and the downloading of potentially malicious files, which is very useful because a lot of people, my parents, for example, they click on anything and everything because they think that they're getting a deal on something, or that a specific link will take them to a website that gives them whatever, and all this crap. And because of that, I always get notifications on my physical firewall on our network, on our router, that says that we blocked so-and-so website because this particular device was trying to connect to it. And I'm like, bro, why? Like, and I've had so many conversations about this, but they just keep clicking. So thankfully, there are a lot of different ways to protect against phishing, and Microsoft Defender Smart Screen is one of them. So refer to the official documentation for the Defender Smart Screen, and we can obviously go to, you guessed it, oh no, this is actually on the Microsoft Defender website. So this is not the learn.microsoft, although it is a Microsoft domain anyway. So feedback, smart screen, Microsoft.com. And then you have Microsoft Defender, Smart Screen, frequently asked questions, view all the answers. Look at all this good stuff. More reading for you if you ever need help falling asleep. This is what it will look like. So you have the app and browser control, and then in this particular case, it's been on the warning setting. So it'll warn you instead of automatically blocking it. And then there's the next extreme, which is it's completely turned off. So you never want it to be turned off. You do want it to be on warning, because you do want to get notified in case something is detected to be malicious, because sometimes maybe you do want to go into those deep parts of the web where it is potentially hazardous, but you know what you're doing. So you don't want everything to be blocked off completely. Usually when it's blocked off, it'll just say, access denied, or it'll give you some kind of a forbidden error that it's been blocked, and then you can click on the advanced option, and then it'll take you into the actual website itself. So there are a few different ways that you can go past something that should technically not be allowed, right? This is one of the ways that you can do for checking applications and files, and then there's exploit protection as well. So when you do check application and files, Windows Defender Smart Screen helps you protect your device by checking for unrecognized applications and files from the web. And this is the pop-up that comes up, right? So don't run, or then at the bottom it'll say run, and it's typically under another drop down that's advanced, right? So this is for the app protection, checking apps and files. And then you have exploit protection, which is built into Windows 10 and in our case Server 2019, to help protect your device against attacks. And this is what that screen looks like. So you have the system settings and then the program settings, and then the control flow is default, which has been turned on. Data execution prevention, it's default and it's been turned on, and force randomization has been turned on for images or mandatory ASLR. So unless you're 100% confident in what you're doing, it's recommended that you leave the default settings, which means turn them on, right? So in this particular case, force randomization for images has been turned off. So I misread that. I assumed it was turned on, but these are the defaults. So the defaults in this particular case are to control flow, turn it on, data execution prevention, turn it on, and to force randomization has been turned off. So there is no answer that we need to get for this particular case. We're just going to click the acknowledged partition right here, and it'll give you the correct answer, and you're all good to move on to the next section. So that's for app and browser control. And now we can go and check out device security. You will probably never change any of these settings, but just for the sake of the completion, we're going to cover it briefly. So these things are some of those things that come pre-configured and they're always turned on, and you never want to mess with them, because that's basically what the best options are to make sure that your device is secure. So when you go into device security, there's the core isolation, which is the virtualized based security that's running to protect core parts of your device, meaning the core portions of the computer, for example, the root folders, or for example, the system binaries, the things that are absolutely necessary for your computer to run properly, they've been isolated and completely separate from everything else. So if you were to look at your user being one entity and all of the files that belong to your user profile being a part of that one entity, and then you have the core components of the computer being a completely separate entity, and they've been isolated from everything that's inside of your user profile. If you were to think about it that way, then you can think about the computer being protected. Actually, there was something that we did when I was going through the Linux tutorial for Linux Plus, because thankfully I'm almost done with that. It's a massive tutorial. But as I was going through that, we were talking about this concept, and it's different jargon, but the idea is the same. So I'm going to share that with you. Okay, this is a Linux file system, so I do understand that this may not necessarily look identical to Windows, but the concept again is the same. So what we're looking at over here is an isolated environment, which in this particular case is called the chroot jail. It's irrelevant to Windows, but the concept again is the same, because we're still talking about isolation in this particular case, right? So we're talking about isolating the core components. So in Linux, the core components is here. So this is the root. This is the binaries of the computer that's required for the computer to run. These are the configuration files. This is the home directory. And inside of the home directory, we have a bunch of users. And so inside of the home directory, you have the users. And inside of the user directories, there's their desktop and their pictures and documents, all of that stuff, okay? So in order to separate the main components of the computer so that the computer doesn't get messed with, if somebody in this particular environment clicked on something, let's say, in order to be able to protect this environment, we've isolated it and we've separated it from the users. So this particular person, Bob, whatever they do, it should be isolated from the rest of the system. If you have a good, decent Linux administrator, they should have done it so that Bob's folder and Alice's folder don't affect the rest of the system. And you can do this with manual rules that have been configured for isolation, for sandboxing, for permissions and privileges, and a variety of other things, ownership, and all that stuff. So there should be no way that if somebody hacked Bob, they would get access to the rest of the computer unless they were able to elevate their privileges by finding some kind of a password to the root user and a variety of other tactics that could potentially be used, right? So that's the whole idea of isolating. And typically what it's done is that it's isolating the core components of the computer, which would be represented by this portion right here. And Windows has binaries as well. So it's not like Windows doesn't have binaries, or Windows doesn't have configuration files, or the folder that controls all of the user documents and the user profile. So Windows has all of those things. They're just not meshed together with all of those users, right? The core components of Windows is kept separate. This is what all of this means, right? I'm going way beyond the scope of what was intended to be taught to you in this particular video, but I just want you to get some extra juice out of it just so you can understand what's going on. So the device isolation, the device security isolation that's done by the core, all of these things you're never going to mess with because you don't want to mess with it. You want to keep all of those things separate just in case anything malicious happens, God forbid. And if those things do happen, the computer itself is protected. All your main components are protected and they can't attack you. So core isolation would have to do from protecting the integrity of the memory, so preventing attacks from inserting malicious code into the high security processes. That just sounds very, very sensitive, right? So you don't want to be able to insert malicious code into high security processes, which are considered to be the binary. So you have the daemon, you have the kernel, you have the binaries, you have all of the system binaries and everything else that makes the system do what it does. And you don't want malicious code to be inserted into those portions. So core isolation protects the memory from that. Unless you're 100% confident in what you're doing, it's recommended that you leave the default settings. Don't change it in any way, shape, or form. Below images are from another machine to show another security feature, which would be the security processor in this particular case. This is what the security processor details are. So you have the manufacturer version, the status, so on and so forth. So these are just the portions of the security processor detail. And notice that this image represents a CPU. So I don't know how familiar you are with computer hardware, but that represents a CPU, a chip for the computer processor. And the trusted platform module, aka this trusted foundry, I think is what they call it in cybersecurity. And this specific module technology is designed to provide hardware-based security-related functions. A TPM chip is a secure crypto processor that is designed to carry out cryptographic operations. It includes multiple physical security mechanisms to make it tamper-resistant, and malicious software is unable to tamper with the security functions of the TPM. So this is a technology that's been designed to provide hardware-based security functions. So it's a part of the hardware of the machine. And the chip itself is a secure crypto processor that's designed to carry out cryptographic functions, and it includes multiple physical security mechanisms to make it tamper resistant, and malicious software is unable to tamper with the security functions because it is a physical part of the hardware. So software should not be able to mess with it because most of its security features are embedded and ingrained into it physically. Sorry for the background noise. My neighborhood is chaos evidently today. So the question here is, what is the TPM? It is the Trusted Platform Module that we see right here, and it is a chip that is a part of the security-related hardware of your Windows computer. So there we go. That's what we got for device security. Now let's go into the BitLocker. So what is BitLocker? BitLocker Drive Encryption is a data protection feature that integrates with the operating system and addresses the threats of data theft or exposure from lost, stolen, or inappropriately decommissioned computers. So it's a data protection feature that integrates with the OS and addresses the threats of data theft or exposure from lost, stolen, or inappropriately decommissioned computers. Okay, so this is something that if you lost your computer or your laptop or maybe your phone or something like that, there's something that is similar to this that would be embedded on that device to protect the device from data theft or exposure from it being lost or stolen or inappropriately decommissioned, meaning that they didn't break it down properly or they didn't wipe it properly. So on devices that have the TPM installed, the BitLocker offers the best protection, and BitLocker provides the most protection when used with a TPM module, Trusted Platform Module, version 1.2 or later. The TPM is a hardware component installed in many new computers by computer manufacturers. It works with BitLocker to help protect user data and ensure that a computer has not been tampered with while the system was offline. So if we wanted to learn more about this, we could go to the BitLocker website directly by going to Learn Microsoft and of course looking at the BitLocker overview, and then you have a bunch of great reading material in case you ever have trouble sleeping. So there is that. So the question here is, what must a user insert on a computer that does not have a TPM version 1.2 or later? And it's actually useful because we do have the answer here, but we need to go and find it, right? So let's actually go to the website and search for the version 1.2 or later. So if they don't have a version 1.2 or later, what do you find? So I just ran a Control F function, or Command F since I'm on Mac, and I searched for 1.2, and there's literally only one portion of the article that we're looking at that talks about it, and it says for BitLocker to use the system, the device must have a TPM 1.2 or later. If a device does not have a TPM, saving a startup key on a removable drive is mandatory when enabling BitLocker. So this is referring to the USB that we talked about, and it says it must support USB mass storage, so on and so forth. And the answer specifically here is the USB startup key. So we do have startup key, and a removable drive could be a USB drive for the most part. You can also do what we did in our search when we learned about search skills and just Googling the questions that we're looking for, and you could literally just highlight it and Google it, and you will see that there is multiple walkthroughs for the thing that we're actually running, for the room that we're actually running, and a few of them are actually from people who have taken the TryHackMe course as well. And so you'll get the format of the answer, which is the USB startup key. But it is actually on the Microsoft documentation as well. So if you actually look for 1.2, it'll immediately jump to TPM 1.2, and then you can put everything else together just based on the contents that you have over here. All right, moving on to Volume Shadow Copy Service, also known as the VSS. This coordinates the required actions to create a consistent shadow copy, which is also known as the snapshot or point-in-time copy of the data that's supposed to be backed up. So the Volume Shadow Copy Service, it basically takes a snapshot of everything that's supposed to be backed up, and you can designate what needs to be backed up or what should be backed up by the VSS. VSS copies are stored on the system volume information folder on each drive that has protection enabled. If VSS is enabled, system protection is turned on. And if that actually is the case, then you can perform the following tasks within the advanced system settings. You can create a restore point, you can perform system restore, you can configure restore settings, and you can delete restore points. From the perspective of us, which are the security and analysts and security engineers, malware writers knows of this Windows feature. So malware people, hackers, know about this potential feature, and what they do is they write code in their malware to look for these files and delete them. So your restore points, they'll write code to look for these restore points and delete them so that you can't restore your computer. Therefore, when they hold you at ransom, then you're screwed, right? You don't have any more restore points. And then it makes it impossible to recover from a ransomware attack unless you have an offline, offsite backup, which I highly recommend everybody does, especially if you have critical information on your computer. I store all of my critical information on an external drive at all times. There is nothing on my actual computer that is critical that I don't have at least a backup of on an external drive. But as my working drive, when I deal with client information or when I deal with my personal documents or even videos that I'm working on that I don't want to lose the content for, it's my working drive is an external drive. There's nothing that's actually on the physical computer. And this is something that I learned the hard way, because there was a point that I actually lost my data because of, it wasn't even a ransomware or anything like that. It was just the computer glitched and I needed to reformat the computer. And as a part of that process, I lost a lot of my data. And that became the day that I was like, you know what? I'm not going to store anything on the actual computer. Everything is just going to be on the external drive, and I'm going to work off of the external drive. And that way I can guarantee that nothing is lost if anything happens to the actual computer, or if I ever get hacked or something like this. And then to give yourself an extra layer of protection, you duplicate the contents of that external drive on another drive. So you have redundancies now. You have one copy on your working drive, you have one copy on your backup drive, and then in that situation, none of your content ever gets lost, none of your data ever gets lost. Your backup drive would be locked up in your house. It'll never travel with you anywhere. And there's literally no possible way that it would ever get lost. And then if you really want to be secure, you make a third copy and you put that inside of like a bank vault or something. And that way, inside of like a safety deposit box or like a completely separate location from your house, just in case anybody breaks into your house. You know what I'm saying? It's like just the luck favors the paranoid when it comes down to security. So that's basically what I think about when I think about working with data and preparing for any kind of recovery point. That's really what I consider. So if you want to configure shadow copies within the attached VM, we can go into our local disk, go to configure shadow copies, and then from here we will get the options for shadow copies. And then it says that there is no, in our particular case, or in this screenshot, it has not been enabled. Both of these are disabled on the disk C and the external volume, it seems. So there is no enabling on this thing, so we would need to actually enable them. And if you interact hands-on with the VSS, I suggest exploring day 23 of Advent of Cyber 2, which is the annual competition that TryHackMe holds that gives away a lot of prizes. So this year there's $100,000 worth of prizes that are being given away. So this is something else that we can consider, and I'll probably try to do videos for the Advent of Cyber Part 2 as well. But for now, we have our question, which is what is the VSS, which is the volume shadow copy service. So this is what it looks like when you want to deal with shadow copies. You just right click on the actual list, the disk drive, the local disk, and then you can click on configure shadow copies and it will bring this up for you. And that's basically it. And that's all we got. That's all she wrote, as they say, for our particular room for today. In conclusion, we covered a few built-in Windows security tools that ship with the Windows OS, which are included in the Windows OS, and they actually are very powerful. They may be simple, but they're very powerful. There's still a lot that we can be covering. And again, we have the Windows Fundamentals one room that I've already done, that there should be a video up already, and Windows Fundamentals 2 is already up as well. So you can just go through those just to get some of the other stuff if you haven't seen them. And to learn more about the Windows OS, you'll need to continue the journey. So we have all of these other rooms. And again, because of the fact that this is a free room on TryHackMe, you will get access to every link that was inside of this room. And you can even run the virtual machine that was inside of this room. So I do recommend that at the very least, you create a free account if you don't want to do the, what is it, like $7 a month or something like that. Because there's also a discount code in the description of every single one of my videos that will give you a discount to TryHackMe. So in case you don't want to do that and you just want to stay on the free membership, you still get access to hundreds of free rooms on TryHackMe that allow you to launch virtual machines and go through a bunch of great stuff. So attackers use built-in Windows tools and utilities in an attempt to go undetected within the victim environment. This tactic is known as living off the land. Refer to the following resource to learn more about this. I think that was an actual room that we did, living off the land. But there's also a GitHub series of, look at this, look at all this stuff. This is crazy stuff. So these are the binaries that are considered to be the living off the land binaries, scripts, and libraries that you can use when you go to, if you're a hacker and you want to live off of the internal binaries of the computer. All of these things are available to you to live off the land because these come pre-installed and pre-configured with every single Windows computer. For example, Bash or where is it? Where did I see it? CMD. Like the CMD just by itself is like, okay, well, you can do everything inside the command line. Like you don't need anything else. As long as it has a command line, you can pretty much run everything that you need to. So yeah, that was pretty much it. And that is the conclusion of our particular room today. And indeed, if you got value out of this particular room, then I do encourage that you check out the rest of the videos on our channel. There's a lot of great stuff that's on this channel. I'm very, very proud of it. The community is growing, and I think you'll get a lot of value out of it. I would also say that you should like, subscribe, and turn on the notification bell so that you get notified the next time that a video comes out. And it's going to be literally right below this video, so you can subscribe, you can like the video, drop a comment if you have any questions. I do respond to all of the comments that come in, and if it's a really, really good comment and it has really good questions, then I'll create a video in response to your question. And then not only will you get your question answered, but the rest of the community will also benefit from it as well. So I do encourage you to like, subscribe, and turn on notification bell and drop a comment so that I hear from you. Number one, I would love to hear from you. If you just want to say hi or if you want to say thanks, all that stuff is cool. But if you have any questions, definitely drop your questions as well. And I will go ahead and respond to you and maybe even create a video as a response to your question. And if you don't already know about the Hackaholics Anonymous membership community, I would be remiss if I did not mention it to you. So it is the premier YouTube community for security analysts and hackers. I put a lot of time and energy into this particular community. There is Python automations that are given away. There are Discord chats that are available for every single tier that we have. So even the very, very beginner tier, the cyber supporter tier, gets their own Discord so that they can get access to me. They get access to all of our advanced members. You get all your questions answered. I'm literally watching the Discord chat daily. So if anything comes in, I respond right away. We have in-depth conversations on there. We have our month-end live streams that happen with our advanced members. So if you actually join our advanced memberships, you get access to the month-end live streams. You get access to Python automations that are delivered to you, exclusive content, exclusive downloads, discount on merchandise, literally there's so many stuff. I'm running out of the bandwidth to be able to describe what's available. So there is a 14-minute description video that you can watch, or you can click on this read more button right here and you can go read the description to see what is available on every single tier that is inside of the Hackaholics Anonymous membership community. So if you haven't checked it out already, check out Hackaholics Anonymous. It is the premier YouTube community for cybersecurity analysts, security engineers, professional hackers, ethical hackers, pen testers, black hat hackers. I don't know, don't tell me what you want to do with it, but that's basically what it is. So I would love to see you in the Discord chats. I would love to see you in the community, and I hope I do actually get to see you over there. It's your boy Hank Hackerson at Hank Hacks Hackers, your favorite network and system attacker / protector. If no one else loves you, Hank loves you. Love, peace, and chicken grease. I'll see you in the next video. Later.